committee, they had a 6-month mandate, of which they spent about 500 million shillings. Then it was extended by about another 4 or 5 months, and ended up spending another 300 million shillings. So
on
they spent,
what? Say it.
No, I don't know. On allowances, on
Lunch.
the office, I don't know, tea,
Fuel.
I don't know. But at the end of their period, they had spent almost 600-700 million shillings.
Hello friends, welcome to The Narrative, the podcast where we give Africa's sports personalities and celebrities a judgment-free environment to express themselves freely and create their own story. We talk about anything and everything sports, but most of all, we have a good time. So today I'm sitting down with someone I really respect in the Kenyan sports space, not just because of her longevity in the industry, but also because I believe she's a brilliant mind on matters sports. Carol Radull, welcome to the Narrative Podcast.
You're making my head big.
By the way, I didn't know you grew up in Botswana.
In Botswana, I did, Dumelama. You just said you said hello, and I said hello back. And you say ma if it's woman, ra if it's to a man.
So I googled, and ma was like ma'am. So I was like,
Yes, Dumelama, Dumelara.
So I didn't want to call you like Made. You know what I mean? Like I was like, is that? You're a spring chicken, please.
18 till I die.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you,
It's
Silale.
so lovely to have you here. As I said, I respect you so much about your experience, and I know we talked about this off camera. I know you hate being interviewed.
I do not like being interviewed. I don't like the focus on
either.
me.
I don't like it because
we're
the ones who do.
person. You
but
played basketball at
we
the
do
highest
the interviewing.
level.
We do the interviewing, right?
Yes.
We're not on the receiving end. That time when you interviewed me on Radull Live, I had 5 mind farts, 2 internal panic attacks, and mild heart failure.
Like, you were great. You're just talking about yourself and your career.
You know, I do this thing where I zone out. So if you saw my eyes get glassy, it's because in my mind I was having a proper fight. Okay.
You're like, what's she saying?
You know, I just want to respond in one sentence, and you're like, no, elaborate, but be comfortable.
Today I'm in the hot seat.
Today you're in the hot seat. You feel free to ask me questions if you have any of
I
them.
will.
And we can get started.
Let's do this.
So, 20 years at Radio Africa. Everyone wants to talk about it, right? That's water under the bridge, though.
21 years.
21 years.
Yes.
Whew.
A lifetime.
There are some people in this room, I will not say their names. I'm not sure if they're 21.
They're barely
years.
21. And it wasn't even my first job. Before that, I was at the BBC for 2 years. I was at Reuters for 2.5 years. I did Omo Pick a Box for a year.
So you write a book, Basi. What are you waiting for? I mean, that's a wealth of experience.
This is my youth even read books. They want, I don't know how many, 160 characters.
We can make it an audiobook.
Okay.
They can listen to it in their cars. But all that is water under the bridge, right? What have you been doing after you left, for lack of a better word, formal employment? What has your career journey been like since then?
Actually, I didn't, I left Radio Africa in I think it was end of July 21, and I still went to Nation Media Group for a year. I was on Nation Radio doing the sports show over the weekend. So we kept that alive for about a year. Couldn't agree on working modalities. So after a year, everybody went their separate ways. Mm-hmm. I've been focusing a lot on digital, which is still marketing, it's still media.
Yeah.
During COVID, I think it was April of 2020, that's when I started Radull Live. Because remember, we were all stuck behind closed doors. You couldn't communicate with your audience. Our radio show had been suspended because it was minimal people going to the office. There was no sponsorship to keep us on air because between all the brands, Guinness ran away because bars were closed. DSTV ran away because there was no football.
Right.
The betting companies, there was no football. There was nothing happening. So of course no corporate was spending money. So we had to sit at home doing nothing. So that's when I decided, let me start Radull Live. one, I've been toying with an idea of focusing on Kenyan sports people, because when we're on radio, it's about selling to make money.
Right.
And if you're selling to a Kenyan sport audience to make money, you're selling English Premier League. You're selling a lot of foreign sport because it's dictated by what will sell and what the corporates will invest in. But I'd been toying with the idea of doing something for Kenyan sports people.
Right.
So I had that opportunity to do that in 2020 as Radull Live, and that was to focus 100% on either sportsmen and women or something involving sports, Kenyan sportsmen and women. So when I left air formal employment at Nation, well, Nation Media Group wasn't even formal employment. It was coming in on Saturday to do radio, coming in on Monday to do TV, and the rest of the week I was still doing my digital stuff. So when I left Nation, I decided, let me take Radull Live to the next level. Let me try and push agendas as well in sport. And as of this year, take it outside, because I remember when I interviewed you, it was in my living room, in my studio.
Yeah.
This year, we were at Wadi Degla the other time, we were at Kasarani. Yesterday, we were at the skating rink at Panari doing the ice hockey team.
Oh, that's dope.
We are doing, so we're at a physiotherapist. She does physiotherapy for sports people. We're at her clinic earlier this week as well. So we've taken the show outside.
Okay.
So that is more or less what I have been doing. I was fortunate enough to have built my social platform from when Facebook started, when Twitter started, like 12, 15 years ago. So media, I don't need formal employment to reach an audience. Formal employment, radio and TV is just reaching an audience. What is media?
Yeah.
It's reaching an audience.
Right.
So I'm able to reach an audience through my digital platforms, which are, fortunately enough, and I'm humbled,
Followers.
followed.
Easy.
I'm on 1 million on Facebook.
Okay, girl.
Almost on Twitter. So yeah, so I have
That's
an
awesome.
audience, and I
Yeah.
decided, let me speak directly to that audience, both through Radull Live and through what I post every single day. And I make sure I focus on Kenyan sport almost as equally as foreign sport, because that is what our media has not been getting right.
Right.
I remember about 15 years ago when I asked myself why we do a radio show from August to May. We used to do it when we started on Kiss 100. It was August to May, because we were heavily focused on English Premier League. And the idea was between May and August, there's no sport. So I'm like, what do you mean between May and August there's no sport? So that's when I went to check what is the Kenyan Premier League all about.
Yeah.
And when I started covering this Kenyan Premier League, media were barely covering it at all. I looked for a game to watch. There was an article this size in the Daily Nation with fixtures of the day. So I said, why don't I use my digital platform to do what I want? I'm answerable to nobody. If the corporates come, well and good, they keep me paying bills.
Now, is this as recently as just 2020, or is this far, far back?
For Radull Live I started in 2020. As far back as Facebook and Twitter go, I started doing Kenyan Premier League, Kenyan sports, doing what I wanted. In fact, we even extended our radio show to not break in May, to continue, because between May and August, the Kenyan Premier League was on.
Right.
Remember, it used to run from February to November. So between May and August, there is Kenyan Premier League. There's so many other leagues, there's so many other sports. There's basketball, there's hockey, there's so much happening in Kenyan sport during those months. So why would we suspend a show for 3 months because there's no sport? And the beauty of now my social platforms from way back as far as 2020, and of course doing way back 2010, is I could post what I wanted, and I could focus on what I wanted, and I decided, let's build our own sport.
Right.
The EPL is fun and games, Arsenal is fun and games, but what can I do with the mouthpiece I have and the social platform I have to grow Kenyan sport? And those are the questions I asked myself.
That's really awesome.
So I started posting that a long time ago, and it's something I've just scaled up now that I'm unemployed.
Oh, but unemployed means you're independent, which is, having that flexibility is really good.
The good thing is there are people, just as corporates take their money to radio and TV stations to advertise, they're now doing the same on digital platforms. So I have those same clients coming to me directly, not going through a radio station. Right now, between I think Betika and DSTV, MultiChoice, those are my biggest clients. They've been with me for I think 3-4 years continuously. During the World Cup period, the Coca-Colas, the Guinnesses, they all come on board as well because they're selling football agendas. I've had so many other clients come in and out, from ABSA, who are financial sponsors of the English Premier League, to Brookside, who come in and out, to Total Energies, who sponsor a lot of African tournaments.
Yeah.
So they come to me directly and say, can we run advertising on your platforms? So I am actually a media house.
In and of yourself.
Yes, and because the audience is now there.
Yeah.
Because if you notice of late, it's a sad situation, but so many media houses are laying off people. Why? Because the revenue is no longer coming in. Because the corporates are no longer seeing the value of being on mainstream media. The costs are so high, and the eyeballs are not there. The people you said here are barely 21 years old.
Yeah.
They're on their phones.
Yeah.
They're on the social media
They're on
platforms.
social
So they're
media.
not watching mainstream television or listening to mainstream radio. Radio still has a lot of following, but it's scaling back. That's why so many mainstream media houses are suffering right now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the way the world has shifted.
Yeah.
It's nobody's fault. But when was the last time you read a newspaper, you know?
Well, I read one every morning, but
Well, that's
but
you,
that's
my darling.
I
can't remember.
There's a reason
because-
why I do that. On a
Yeah.
good day, I don't. I actually.
But you
really
still
don't.
get the news online.
Exactly.
It's
I
not that
can
you're no
go.
longer-
There's Daily Nation. I can get those same stories on the internet. I can just log in and get it.
And you, at least you're a bit not old, but you're older than Gen Z.
Yes.
Who literally just
they don't
want
buy
the
newspapers.
160 characters.
Yeah.
And they feel I'm informed.
Yeah.
Or their WhatsApp groups, people are sharing things there.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, viewership for mainstream media is scaling back.
Yeah.
And it's a sad state of affairs. I mean, it's not something to celebrate, but they also need to find a way to shift to digital so that
Yeah.
they can still consume, they can still attract that revenue.
Yeah.
So I'm fortunate that I took social media seriously a long time ago. And the beauty of it is I'm not answerable to anybody.
Yeah. No, it's
I try to
free.
behave.
You try to behave. You've tried.
I try to behave for my own good.
Yeah.
Like you'll never hear me foul language. I try not to delve too much in national politics unless
Yeah.
it involves sport. So I try to stay away from scandal. Kenyans decide what they want to make a scandal. So
There was I don't know if I call it a podcast, but a show I saw on YouTube. You were with Mark Masai and someone else.
oh yes.
And they were saying how in the comments everyone was like, so you just become CS of sports.
And I'll tell you what I told Mark Masai. You
Yes.
don't appoint yourself. But I don't believe you have to become a CS of
I
sport
agree.
or an FKF Federation president or whatever it is to have an impact in sport.
Right.
I think everybody has their role to play. If you're a basketball fan, go watch basketball. If you're a hockey fan, stick with hockey. Football, come with us, you know. You don't have to have a position. My problem with a lot of Kenyan fans is we're keyboard warriors. And without making an effort ourselves, we're just waiting for something to criticize. And you mentioned that podcast with Kina Mark, and I mentioned to them that fans have a role to play in the growth of any sport, not just football. And they turned it around to say, Radull said fans are responsible for the failure of football in this country. You know, they twisted it, and then people are there getting angry who've not even watched the show. Because on the flip side, I said, you know what, the government hasn't built the infrastructure to attract fans to watch the games. The clubs haven't done enough work to market and brand themselves to attract fans. So I don't even blame fans who don't say, for instance, go and watch local sport. You've not given me a good environment.
Right.
I went for the World Cup in Qatar. The comfort from the airport, the buses, to where you're staying, to the train, to getting to the stadium, to entering the stadium, to where you sit, it's just such a welcoming experience.
And I think that's the key word that you've just mentioned there, experience.
Yes, it's and
It's
sport is
about
an experience.
exactly, but not always the case, and certainly not the case in Kenya. Oftentimes, like even let me just take the example of basketball. I go to a game, I watch the game, I go home. There's no experience. There's banter with my friends, maybe there, but then afterwards we'll go to
If you're not a hardcore basketball fan, you wouldn't go.
You wouldn't go. I go there because that's the reason why the people who are in the stands are actual basketball players, because we're in that environment. But someone who lives
the
in
basketball fans would love to come, but for an experience. And so that is on the clubs, that's on the federations, that's on the people organizing the leagues. That's not on the fans. Give the fans something to come for. So I don't fault fans, but there are those who just don't go, have never even tried to enter Nyayo Stadium, but they will criticize an experience they've actually never had. So it's two sides. The fans have a role, the media has a role, the club owners certainly have a role, the players themselves. And of course the federation, the CS, of course, it trickles up because everybody has a role.
But my question is this, right? And we touched on this a little bit earlier, off camera. They don't know what to do, right? When I say they, I'm talking about maybe even the federations. I'm talking about the business people that you've mentioned, right? Which is why there's kind of a gap or an opportunity for sports management companies to step in. Because sports management companies have their marketing team, they have the digital marketing team, they have people who understand brand representation.
They have professionals.
They have professionals who understand the industry and how to get the numbers they want, the experience they want, right? So would you say then that the time has come for federations and governments to partner with these companies?
It's long overdue.
It's been overdue.
I was surprised that Kenyan Premier League, there was a time we were having a conversation, Kenyan Premier League, the way it was before, under my friend Jaco Guda and Franco Koth, did not have a marketing department.
How?
You're running a whole Premier League and you don't have a marketing department. At some stage they hired a consultant, but they would do the marketing themselves. And I was like, hire a professional marketer. It doesn't have to be, this thing of it has to be an ex-footballer. Not necessarily. It's good to have footballers to consult, for example, giving footballers an example. It's good to have footballers to consult on how to run a federation, but you need a professional marketer, a professional accountant, a professional branding person. And my issues with FKF, you don't have to know everything. Consult and hire the best people. And I'm glad that your company, it's
Ali
Mali, sorry.
Yes.
Ali Mali, it's long overdue. I mean, I was telling you, I interviewed Greg Snow the other day. He's one of Kenya's top golfers. Okay, he's I think it's his sister or somebody told me, not one of, he is Kenya's top golfer. He's got medals and medals for golf. And I interviewed him on Radull Live a couple of weeks ago, and he said, it's when I was in my heydays, even now, I don't have a professional manager. And I wish I knew about you guys. I didn't quite know that. I only knew about DBA Africa, who, in my view, focus a lot on rugby.
Right.
But he said, I need, athletes in this country need professional managers. He said, when I'm going for an international tournament, I am consumed with booking flights, hotels, getting my paperwork in order,
logistics,
my visas, my whatever, instead of waking up and going to the golf course and improving on my game.
Right.
So by the time I get to a tournament, whether it's South Africa or Middle East, wherever it is, I'm exhausted, you know? And he's organizing his own cab and these little logistical things. So when you said you guys manage athletes, that is long overdue. Somebody like call Greg Snow and tell him we could manage you, you know? And then what I realize our athletes lack is a lot of the knowledge on how to personally brand and market themselves. I get it all the time. There was this, I won't mention him, one of Kenya's best footballers ever. He no longer plays. But when he was in his heydays, he just puts images in bars and having fun with his friends and smoking shisha. And I'm like, as an athlete, is that what you want to put out there? You know, they need Salale telling them, hey,
listen,
hey, delete. No, heck, they need somebody managing their social media accounts. You know, at that stage, Eliud Kipchoge doesn't manage his own social media account. But look how on point it is. And our athletes, what I think, which you maybe should tell us, is that you're not out of reach, because I think in their minds they're thinking you're going to charge me a big load of money to manage me. So maybe that's something you can clarify for them.
I mean, you know, I would love to clarify it. First of all, there is no signing fee at Ali Mali. Our money is made of commission based. So when we bring in the business to you, we take our commission. Our commission is not 50%. It's not. It's much less than that, right? Because at the end of the day, we're thinking about the client first, the athlete first. And you've talked about social media services. We even offer things like financial management, which is so important to so many athletes, especially the guys who get, boom, you have $30,000 in your account. You've operated on a 3,000 shilling a week, budget. Then suddenly you have this huge influx of money. You don't know what to do with it. You don't know what to invest here and maybe look at, let me save over here. Let me buy into this. Let me buy some clothes because I've been invited to the Soya Awards.
That my career could end at any time. Even if I stretch it, by the time I'm 35, I'm no longer playing active football, for example. So they don't think ahead.
Yeah.
I actually said we need to stop this fundraising culture that, but he was a footballer, we have to fundraise. We'll be fundraising forever.
And actually,
we need to tell those there. We need to tell those there now, and I'm sure that's what you're doing, how to avoid becoming a case or a statistic later in life who we need to fundraise for. Make sure they get the money in their pockets now.
Exactly, and I use this example often. Mike Tyson, the guy was heavily in debt at the end of his active career.
Yeah.
Where is he now? The guy is rolling in the monies. That's after his active boxing career. So he was able to engage with professionals, as you said, who can advise him and be like, hey, you know what? You're an influencer. Be a brand ambassador here. Invest here. Look, even someone like Floyd Mayweather. The guy is a businessman. So, I feel like athletes, we don't have to box ourselves into this space where like, okay, now that I'm no longer active, that's it. There's nothing else I can do. Part of the things that we do at Ali Madi is teaching guys skills. Communication skills. You want to do a master's class. You want to do a higher learning course. By the way, you did a great job at the Soya Awards.
Oh, thank you.
I feel like there were some jokes that there were some jokes that I'm laughing, guys.
They were not landing.
I was like, where?
That was a hard crowd. Whoa. I think guys were hungry.
Woo, that was a tough crowd. That was a tough. But for me,
it was fun.
I did a good job. So part of the reason why I'm bringing up the Soya Awards is this. If you look at the crowd. First of all, we have to have Swahili speaker and then now English speaker because it's a diverse crowd. And I think for athletes, even in basketball, you're not going to find so many basketball players who are living in Runda, Lavington, etc., etc. And I'm trying to choose my words very carefully. But athletes,
even though we should have,
but athletes are generally seen as guys who are not well spoken, who are not necessarily well educated. And it's hustlers.
Real hustlers.
Real hustlers. And it's like they're fixed in this box. And it doesn't have to be like that. These are guys who can go through training. At some point in time, all of us were inexperienced in what we do. But we were taught, we were given opportunities to develop those skills. We have many situations where there's someone I was talking to who was at I think it was some marathon in Spain. And the winner was Kenyan. And during that interview with the press, they could not express themselves. They can't express themselves because they only know how to express themselves in Swahili, and even still then, they don't know what to say. And I had this conversation with Elias Makori, and he was like, so many guys need to go through media training.
Yeah.
Just so they can have that confidence. That confidence gives you that personality, and then now you bring in sponsorships. Because people are like, I like the way.
Yeah.
And we're not saying that you have to be fluent and affluent in English, right? But you just need to express yourself clearly.
It's interesting you mentioned that because one, and this is on both sides of that story. One, we kept saying they should just do their interviews in Kiswahili if they're not confident.
Yeah.
Because we see it happening in French and Spanish and Portuguese and all that stuff. But on the flip side, if you're going to want to attract an international sponsor, you have to be able to communicate, to an audience larger than Kenya.
True.
So while I support them doing that interview in a language they're comfortable with, at the back of the mind they also have to think, I'm marketing to the world. I'm not just speaking to Kenya.
Yeah.
I guess those French and whatever are lucky as in they can get big endorsements from their French-speaking countries.
Right.
We don't really have people in Kenya who are going to give you those big endorsements. So if you want international endorsements, very important to polish upon your ability to speak to a worldwide audience.
Yeah.
Just my thoughts on that.
No, I agree 100%. I agree 100%. Now, Carl, you have taken me off my schedule, as in we have gone down
You
another
said we're
road.
gonna have fun. I'm waiting for the cocktails.
Oh, but I'm having a really good time. Now, back to you. I know you don't like talking about you.
I don't like talking about
But don't
I'm
worry.
boring.
It's a gentle question. It's not easy to be a female journalist in a male-dominated space, right? And I imagine more so back in the day than now, when we have higher levels of representation. And I feel like, and it happens with my guy friends as well. When we're having sports banter, somehow a sexist comment just comes in, or something that is offensive to women, and it's part of locker room conversation. But now here we are, women being invited into locker room conversation, and guys forget that
I'm still a girl.
We're still women. Hi. So how has that experience been for you, and how have you been able to nip it in the bud?
When I started my first show, I've been a sports fan since forever and a day. My high school sports were swimming and badminton, never football. Football, I was just a fan. My dad was a fan. My brothers were fans. I became a fan. When I first started doing the show, the sports show in 2006, it was Mina Kigeni and I.
Yeah.
And it was a nerve-wracking experience for that very reason, that I didn't have any role models to look up to, as in women who have been in the position I found myself in.
Right.
I was fortunate to have Mina, because Mina was my friend. We used to drink a lot together. Not a lot, but we would hang out a lot together. So we knew how to banter.
Yeah.
And he made it so easy for me to just come on the show and banter. And he'd tell me, Radull, you know this stuff. We talk about it in the bar. We talk about the game. We talk about the players. You know it. And I realized the first thing is, know your stuff. If you're a woman in sport, know your stuff. For me, I was lucky it came naturally, because I loved football, I loved Arsenal.
Right.
And I know the game. So it was just talking about something you know. As you grow, of course, you have to learn about other sports that are not really your primary sports, but you're in the space, so you want to speak about as many sports as possible. I used to be bullied a lot. I think I was lucky in 2006 that social media hadn't landed, because people would bully me a little bit on text, those SMS lines. Who's that? A girl talking about sports. And I'd get a lot of those comments. I guess it would have been much harder in a world where Twitter just rips you apart and destroys your confidence. So I was fortunate that I had people around me who made it. Mina was a very key person, and then when he left the show, Caroline Mutoko came and told me, I don't see you take over the show. I'm like, I become the main of the show. That's intimidating.
Yeah.
But by then, the audience had realized that, one, I knew what I was talking about. Heaven forbid I didn't. I would have been stuck. So they accepted me very quickly, because they realized, maybe she knows what she's saying, you know. So that made it easier for me to enter the space.
Yeah.
And then it didn't hurt that I was with Mina and a guy called Manu, Ken Gidinji's elder brother, who we started the show with. They were both Manu fans. I was an Arsenal fan, so I'd be bullied a lot. So I'd get a lot of I'd get sympathy votes, so to speak. And by the time people were taking notice, I had already made a footprint. So for almost 3 or 4 years, I remember when I started doing a broadcast at Supersport, I was one of the first women doing football on Supersport. I was before Carol Shabalala. She found me already at Supersport. And so in 2010, when I started doing, I think 2009, that's when Supersport offered me the opportunity to host Simba Soccer, which was a Kenyan Premier League show. I was like, it's just about knowing your content and believing in your content and believing in yourself. But you also have to know that if you're in the position of hosting the show, you have to know more. You can't just be a fan. So read. I used to read the newspaper to learn about the players and the different teams and the coaches and their names and how they play.
Do you feel like as a woman, you actually had to make more of an effort to seem more knowledgeable about the sport than even like a man? Like a guy can get a pass because he's a guy.
If I made a mistake and Mina made the same mistake, I'd get more flack.
Right.
That's a fact. But I was actually accepted very quickly. It's not as hard as people think it was for me, which I would love to say it was the hardest experience. It wasn't.
Which is awesome.
I think they learned. Fortunately, the show was huge, and so a lot of people got to know me firsthand, which doesn't happen nowadays. You see on a blog about a radio presenter you've never heard of, and you've crucified the person having never listened to them. Those days you had to listen to us on Kiss 100. So I was accepted very early.
Okay.
So I didn't actually struggle as much as I'd like to say I did.
Okay.
And then I made sure, like when we started Radio Jumbo in 2008, I was a program controller, and I had the free hand to hire. So a lot of the producers behind the scenes, I said, why don't I give women a chance? I started getting blogs from Michelle Katami. This is my blog, please hire me. And I'm like, hell yeah. So I'm fortunate to say that Michelle Katami came through my hands. Ida Waringa, I was the first person who hired her. Mukami Wambora, okay, she started at Capital Sunday with James Okabi. But a lot of these women, I'm proud enough to say they passed through my hands. And they really, really, really make me proud. And they know their stuff. They came to me already knowing their stuff. I didn't even have to tell them, know your stuff. Someone like Mukami, she plays football. You know, Aida, she's a basketball freak. You know, and everybody had Michelle. She loves football. She loves athletics. She decided athletics is her thing. And so I sort of opened the way for them to come in. Nowadays, there's so many women. There's so many women around Kenya, around the continent, who cover sport in different spheres. We even have like Sarah Chwada, who decided, I'm doing sports law, you know. So we have so many women in every sphere right now. And I hope I had an impact in what they do today. It wasn't as easy as it was for the guys who are getting into sports broadcast, because before that, we didn't even have much sports broadcast. We'd have the 1 minute sports bulletin at the end of news radio or something, you know. So this is where I am today. I think I also didn't really care. If you don't pay my rent or buy my clothes, your opinion doesn't really matter to me. You know, I've been bullied so many times on social media about different things, but let it never be what I cover or what I do. Let it be an opinion. I don't mind having discussions on opinion, but what I do, I make sure I research, and I keep telling guys. I used to argue with Roy Kwariuze all the time. You just come on the Saturday show and say, you know what, I'm a Manu fan, so let me just banter. Actually do your research, get to know your staff, male or female. It's the same challenges. Know your staff, and then be the passion. I didn't have to work at the passion. The passion, I realized, was just there. And the minute I got a platform, I'm like, hey, I'm going to talk till you try and shut me up.
No, but I'm happy to hear that your journey, I mean, there's some women who are not been as fortunate, so I'm happy to hear that your journey was not bumpy in that regard.
Not as people think it was.
Oh, that's really great.
But I have to thank Maina. I can't thank Maina. He's like, sit down, I'm gonna relax. He talks for her.
He made sure you eased into it really nicely. Now I want to talk about sports and entertainment. You had the Jaza Study Initiative. First question, do you think it was an idea that was ahead of its time? Second question, for those who, because we have an international audience, for those who don't know what it is, what is it and where is it today? Then now we can branch from there.
For the international audience, Jaza Study literally means fill up the stadiums. And it stemmed from the need to want to get fans back into the stadium and watching the game. We started with football. It wasn't only meant for a football thing. But it's to create an experience when they come for the game, because that is what we saw was lacking. I don't think Jaza Study was ahead of its time, because in 2007, 2008, when I first started watching Kenyan Premier League, when I was telling you I found a small article like this, I ran a similar program, but it didn't have a name.
Right.
So I would literally, the first game I ever went for, when I asked myself, Kwani Kenya doesn't have a league? And I took myself to find out, so if Kenya has a league, what is it about and can people watch? What is it? So the first game I went for, I remember it was Tusker Sony. I couldn't find anyone to go with because they were afraid Oh, is the stadium secure? Is blah, is blah, is blah. I found someone, went for the game, had a good experience, talked about it on the radio the next day. Caroline Mutoko joined in and said, can I come next week? And we started this movement where I would wake up every Sunday morning and start making calls. I couldn't do it on Saturday because I had a show. And on Sunday, I'd pick up the newspaper, where's the game? And then I start calling. And I would send out about 50 texts and maybe 15, 20 people would turn up. And we have places we would meet. If we're watching a Nyayo game, we meet at Kengele's West. If we're watching Hope Center, we meet at Kengele's Lavington. If it's at Kasarani, I can't remember, we used to meet somewhere on Thika Road. If it was City Stadium, we had a place we would meet. And we would literally go as a group with our water bottles. I won't say what was inside them. But we would go watch the game and have a good time.
Yeah.
And we started creating a vibe around that Kenyan sport is cool to watch. I went because and then I realized that it's not the same as other sports. Every time we're talking about Arsenal bought a player for £10 million, I'm like, you start calculating in Kenya shillings, and you're like, what?
Yeah.
That's money this league has never seen. So of course I started to take an interest and I wonder why is there such a disparity in the money angle of football, in how the players are treated. You see a player leaving the game and jumping into a mat and going to his one-bedroom house somewhere, and I'm like, why? When these are the things I'm seeing on TV about how the cars that Arsenal players drive and blah, 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 and why are things so different? So I ran that program. I started, and then because we made it loud on Kiss 100, Coca-Cola came on board.
Yeah.
It was given a name, Kiss for Football, and we started driving people. There's nothing like seeing Caroline Mutoko in her heels and long nails in the stadium.
Yeah.
You just make it becomes anybody can come and watch the game. It doesn't have its owners, because the belief and perception was that a certain class of people go to the stadium to watch football. So we made it. I was there because I wanted to make a change in the game. They were bringing the hype, which I couldn't complain about, because that's what you need. You need hype around the game. So they started bringing a DJ, the league, Oguda and his guys, at least Nyayo, they'd have a DJ, there wasn't as much entertainment as we wanted to see. So the problem with that, and I ran that for about a year, we ran with it for about a year. I'm the only one who really wanted to stay with it. I think Jalango, Jala stayed with it. Other guys continued, some fell by the wayside, stopped going to the stadium. And in late 2009, when I was hired by Supersport to now start broadcasting on live games on Sundays, I couldn't continue with the program. Mm-hmm. So the minute Radull stopped pushing people on Sunday morning, it kind of died out.
Okay.
So that lasted for about 2 or 3 years. And because now whatever Supersport says, you're in Mombasa on Sunday, you're in Machakos, I was now working on Sundays. So it sort of fizzled out. So fast forward to about 6 years later, I get a call from Chris Darling and his friends, and they say we've started this thing called Just a Study. It hasn't got off the ground. His two partners were guys who live in Dubai, but one was a former Gor Mahia player, the other one played football and cricket as well. And they said, we have this idea, it's called Just a Study. So it was exactly what I did in 2007, but now it was being formalized.
Okay.
It was being registered, it's being run like a company, so that it has a little bit of sustainability. So that even if Radull can't call people, it should be able to run on its own.
Right.
So we started, I think, in early 2017. Mm-hmm. Looked for corporate partners. That's a hard one. But when we started, we decided, look, we were 4 of us, me, Chris Darling, and the 2 other guys. We said we're going to literally changa. So we opened a bank account, everyone is giving 20,000 shillings a month. That's, I think, what we started with. So we would all put 20,000 shillings a month into the bank account. And when we get an activation, so we don't have to look for money. So the first activation we did at Camp Toyoyo called out a lot of favors. Microbar, shout out to you, gave us bleachers. And Mozinderi too gave us toilets. We literally called for favors. Mm-hmm. Then we realized, what are people missing in a game? They're missing that experience. What can we do? Let's get artists on board. Chris Darling was one of us. So he would automatically, beginning of the game, he brings his Doty family DJs. They would play music before the game, have a show at halftime, play music at the end. We started reaching out to Kenyan artists. I think Waire played at the very first activation. And you know when you're telling Waire, look, this is what we're trying to achieve. And he's like, I will do it. I mean, you pay minimal costs, which I thank all the artists who work with us because they wouldn't charge us rate card. But we also have to respect that this is what they do. So we can't ask you to do it for free.
Right.
So Waire played at our opening, a halftime show with Waire. I remember Kisumu, we had Jua Kali. We had, who did we have in Kakamega? I think some local artists as well, you know. So we decided, let's make it an experience. And we started on Facebook by asking people, why don't you go to the stadium?
And what were the responses? Because I'm curious.
Come to your, remember that's the time Nyayo was under renovation for 4 years. So they were playing at Kamtoyoyo. There's nowhere to sit. There are no toilets for the ladies. Security, we're not comfortable about security. Then the quality of the game itself. So we said, look, we can't change the quality of the game because that is something that will take time.
Right.
But we can try and give you an experience and you will help to grow the game. Because right now there's no money. And the agreement we had with clubs was, because we talked to the federation, the KPL, the agreement we have with clubs is we drive people there. Whatever we make at the gate, that belongs to the home club. We're not touching your gate takings. We will look for corporate partners or we will fund the activities ourselves. And we will call in favors, whatever it takes, we will do that. That is upon us to do. And you as the clubs, you will get the money, you'll be able to pay your players. Hopefully those crowds will also attract corporate sponsors for you.
Right.
So now at least it had a bit of a structure. And as we went along, there are people who, I remember Naivas came on board for Kisumu activation. We had Nando's came on board for one activation. Betika were our partners for the longest time. They came in and out more than anybody else. Now, on its death, well, not really on its death, because it's never going to die. But 2020 was when Betika told us, you guys, let's do monthly activations. If they work, we scale it up next season. So we did, I remember beginning of 2020, I think we started in Kisumu, we went to Mombasa, we did Kericho, we did Kakamega. Then we were going to do our first Women's Premier League game in Thika. COVID.
Oh, that word. That word.
Then our dear government that took almost 2 years to officially allow fans back in the stadium. Remember we were complaining.
Yeah.
I mean, the bars were open.
Yeah, everything was open.
Were back.
Yeah.
Churches were open. Stadiums were, they barely even fill up to the capacity. We're told no. Officially fans not allowed. So unfortunately in that period things just, the sponsor found other things to put their money in. People went separate ways, you know, you start you refocus your hustles, and so we've never really quite taken off since 2020, which is a sad thing. But when we were operational, one of the things we did is we met with clubs. We even had a forum at KICC once, invited clubs and officials and everything. And we're telling them, we as just a study can't be everywhere every weekend. We can't be at games on Saturday, games on, you know how it is to organize one event.
Yeah.
And there are games every weekend, every day of the weekend. So clubs need to take responsibility. They need to start to do what we are trying to do as just a study. They need to get their own musician, they need to get their own DJ. We can help them talking to different artists. Because most of these artists are football fans themselves. Joakali is crazy about football. The guys of Savara is crazy about football, you know. And if you tell them, guys, look, we will, because we respect what you do, so we will try and pay you what we can afford, but also help us. Let's help each other to grow a brand called football.
Yeah.
And a lot of these artists are very willing. They say, if I'm available and blah, 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 I'll come and work with you guys.
Yeah.
So we said, we will still be there to support you, but you as a club needs to take ownership of a Jazza Study-like initiative.
Right.
So that on match day, you hire your own DJs, give your fans experiences, and you will continue to have them. Because every activation we did was full. My social media, you should see the flyers I put every day. Any sport, any football match, send me your flyer, I'll post it and try and help you get fans in your games.
Yeah.
So we will still be there to support you, but you need to do it yourselves. You need to get on social media as a club. You need to sort out what you post. You need to grow your platforms. Anyone who comes for your games, take their data so that you keep in touch with your fans and say, I know Silale was there. have 5 friends, I have all their names, all their numbers. I'll be reaching out to them because they are our fan bases.
Yeah.
But I'll also commit to giving them an experience every time they come.
Yeah.
That's the only way it can be sustainable, if the clubs take ownership of a just a study-like initiative.
Yeah.
Because we can only be at one game
At a time.
and the amount of time to organize that one game, at most we would do like 2 a month, at most.
Yeah.
So it's the club to take initiative to do that.
Yeah.
And 1 or 2 clubs, I remember Zoo FC in Kericho, they really picked up on it. Bandari, they tried to an extent, you know. A few clubs would pick up on it, but most of them were, Ningumu. But our clubs are also suffering. They barely have money to honor away fixtures. Now you're telling them to hire sound, and get a DJ,
But you have to recognize the investment.
it's only through building your fan base that
Yeah.
you'll encourage corporates to then come on board. Because people call me and tell me, Radull, get me sponsorship from this corporate, get me sponsorship here. I said, what do you have to offer them? They're not CSR, they're not NGOs. What are you giving them in return?
But you see, you've guided this conversation in where actually I was going to take it next. You've mentioned corporates. I mean, it's obvious that the fusion of sports and entertainment is not just the future of sports; it's the now.
It's
of
the
sports.
now.
But even in my interactions with corporate representatives, even just trying to knock on a door and be like, please just listen to my project proposal. Corporates like, I don't know you, and sports, there's no money. And yet it is so obvious that there is so much money. Masai Ujiri has been singing about it for the last 15 minutes, where he's like, don't give charity to Africa when it comes to sports, invest, right? So for me, my question is, how do we get corporates involved? There's always the question about return on investment. But I feel like it's reached a point where a lot of corporates are not even giving audience to at least even pitch the ideas. Because now there are companies and there are individuals who get it and understand the business of sports and are pitching very real, financially viable ideas. But guys are not even giving them the opportunity to speak.
You know, it's not the government's responsibility to keep sport running. The government have, I think, infrastructure, legislate the laws, the laws of the country or the laws that govern sport. But I think the government needs to bite the bullet on getting sport off the ground. Last year, when that committee that I refused to join, I was called by Madam Amina, Ambassador. I refused to join because I didn't believe in what it was. I didn't believe in the whole setup, and that which was going to work. And sure enough, I was right.
Is it that committee that was made after the whole scandal?
After Nick was removed, and then they brought in the committee.
Yeah.
And then people made Radull trend for a week because she was not on it. But I told people I was called. I declined. I declined because they couldn't tell me who's going to be it, what's the mandate, what are they couldn't answer any of my questions.
It wasn't clear.
It wasn't clear, and the ambassador Amina called me herself, and it wasn't clear. And I told her, well, if you can answer some of these questions, I would consider it. But sure enough, when I saw the committee and the people who were on it, I said, thank heavens I wasn't. Because even the few good elements in it couldn't work.
Right.
Well, that's hearsay. That's hearsay based on those who I know were on the committee. So maybe it's true, maybe it's not true.
Yeah.
But that committee, they had a 6-month mandate, of which they spent about 500 million shillings. Then it was extended by about another 4 or 5 months, and ended up spending another 300 million shillings. So
on
they spent,
what? Say it.
No, I don't know. On allowances, on
lunch,
the office, I don't know, tea,
fuel.
I don't know. But at the end of their period, they had spent almost 600-700 million shillings. So when the government says they can't, that it's not their job to run the league, it's not their to even fund the league, it's not their job to fund clubs, they're right, it's not their job. But if the government shows belief and puts its money there first, it may be a route to encouraging corporates to do the same.
So the government endorsement must come in first for corporates to be like, okay, we can take a look at this. It's
not a must for the government to come in, but the flip side is the sport is going to die.
Facts.
Right now, we have so many clubs where players have not been paid for 3-6 months, That's normal in Kenyan Premier League, top flight football. So many of the biggest clubs in this country, players haven't been paid. And that is just Kenyan Premier League. Think of the lower tier leagues. Think of other sports.
I was going to say, it's the same narrative across other sports.
So we have a whole force of people not getting paid, as the government says, but it's not our job to fund the league. I think the government just needs to invest for some time to grow it. As you also show these people how to become self-sustaining. Corporates may say, look, the government has sorted out football, or the government has sorted out basketball, or whatever. We now have faith in putting our money in the sport. But nobody, including the government, shows that they believe in any of these sports. I'm not going to bring money to Silale if I don't know something about you. Who are you? What's your track record as somebody who manages people's money? You know? So I don't blame corporates. There's nothing to look at. Even those who give GOR and AFC and those clubs money, I'm sure they just do it while they hold their breath. Like, okay. But corporates should be lining up to sponsor sport.
Yeah.
But we haven't built an environment that gives them confidence to put their money there.
Right.
Than to deal with a club, for instance, where the clubs just have a bad name. And not all the clubs are bad. But unfortunately, football has a bad name. Every time I ask a corporate, why don't you give money? That football is bad. There are people who didn't even know the difference between KPL and FKF when KPL was running the league. They're like, oh, well, we don't believe in FKF. I'm like, but FKF has nothing to do with the KPL.
Yeah.
For them, it's the same thing. Football has a bad name. They've just blanket rejected it. So somebody, and for me that somebody is the government, needs to step up and say, you know what, we're only going to fund this for a year or two. That's 700 million or so you spent. Do you know what could have happened in the league with that kind of money?
So much. So much.
They could have sponsored the league for 3 seasons.
Yeah.
And given each club an odd 10 million shillings.
Mm-hmm. So there's a disconnect. There's a disconnect with...
Somebody needs to step up and bite the bullet for the sake of football. And I use football as an example.
Yeah.
And that somebody for me is the government. Because if this industry dies, and it's an industry.
It is?
Industry. Not cheza, not playing. If it dies, we have so much to lose as a country. Mm-hmm. And I keep saying, imagine if you empower all these sportsmen and women, there'd be more people paying taxes. We wouldn't have to be scrounging for wanting to tax even this glass of juice, you know.
Yeah.
So the government shows no goodwill. And please, I'm talking about the previous government. This one, I don't think they've sat long enough for me to criticize them. No. My experience is the previous government. All that money spent on that committee was the previous government. Right. Spend that money on sports people.
Yeah. Not
on people who are coming in for 6 months and then they're gone.
Yeah. Sports people, sports infrastructure, sports business.
And creating confidence in sport for corporates to take over.
Yeah.
Because in the long run, it's the corporates corporates across the world fund sports.
Yeah.
You know that, you know. But our corporates in Kenya don't have any confidence at all. So who's going to step up and say, taking one for the team? The government needs to take one for the team. Trust me, they have the money for other things.
And just so it's clear, this is my last question for you, just so it's clear, you're saying government should step up. Because for me, I love being solution oriented, right? I feel like also in our sports circles, we talk about the millions of dollars. We complain a lot. And they're valid complaints, but we have to be solution oriented or else the change will never happen. You've said government needs to bite the bullet, they need to step up. If you were to give me like a 2 or 3 pronged plan where government or action plans that government need to do so this environment changes, what would that be?
For most sports, there's of course investing in the youth, which is academy driven. I think that cannot be overstated because fans and corporates like success. And success is not going to come from a 20-year-old realizing, Allah, I can play football, I can play basketball. That needs to come from somebody who can be competitive in that sport, which means you need investment from the age of 8, even younger if possible.
Yeah.
So the government and they have the Kenya Academy of Sports needs to begin to invest in proper youth programs.
So grassroots development.
Grassroots development, without a doubt.
So that's one.
There is this program that this government has proposed, having the county leagues, which I think would work really well. Because even now, the Premier League, especially for football, is very Nairobi centered. You'll find out of the 18 clubs, you'll find more than 50% are Nairobi-based clubs. Yet football is played around the country. So that county league can be very powerful in terms of giving everybody in this country an opportunity to be seen and to experience well-organized football. I'm assuming it will be well-organized.
Yeah.
So then they also need to invest from the top. A lot of times people say, why are they investing from the top when these guys are about to retire? The youth need to have something to aspire to. Because if Harambee Stars is not doing well, if the national rugby or basketball team is not doing well, there's nothing to aspire to. These kids will play football until they get a job. They become a doctor, a teacher, a journalist, whatever they want to be. They will never take sport further because there's there's nothing to aspire to. So we also need to invest from the top. This is more patchwork, but you need to do that because the minute we see what's our basketball guys called?
Morans.
The Morans. When you see the Morans doing it, there's somebody somewhere playing basketball in primary school saying, you know what, I want to play for Kenya Morans because they're successful. Mm-hmm. So invest in that at that level, get the players paid, get them living a lifestyle and achieving something that somebody wants to look up to. And then my third one, I don't know if I've done two.
You've done two. We've said grassroots development, invest from the top at the national team level. That's 2, so 3.
And then sort out the infrastructure.
Hallelujah.
If you see where the women, I was at a Division 1 women's game the other day. It's gravel. It's literally it's gravel. The NCC grounds on Gong Road. It's gravel. It's not even what is it? It's not flat.
Yeah.
It's injuries waiting to happen.
Yeah.
So invest in the infrastructure. We need stadiums all across the country. I'm not even propagating for 5 state of the art. We just need decent stadia like Machakos in every county of this country.
I saw a post that there's a elite sports complex coming up in Mwale.
We have these individual. We need to take sport everywhere.
I know.
Kenya has how many counties? 40? Is it 46 or 47 counties?
I cannot help
you. My youth.
Guys, are you aware?
We need decent infrastructure in every county of this country. And it's not even a joke. And when I say decent, it's not just a pitch. It's a volleyball court. It's a basketball court. It's a tennis court, you know. And I think there's a tennis complex being built at Kasarani. I was at the opening the other day. That's going to do wonders. But what about the person in Mombasa or in Northeastern or in Kisumu or Rift Valley who wants to play tennis?
Yeah.
You know, so you need this infrastructure. You need it accessible to anybody who shows potential, because that's another thing. Mm-hmm. You build nice tennis courts and then it's 500 bob an hour. You know, you've already sliced off.
You already said who you want to use that tennis court.
You know. Yeah. So make all this infrastructure accessible across the country. Mm-hmm. And then you need to somehow, you know, it's tricky because I want the government to invest in, say, football, but of course there's that issue of FIFA will say you're interfering and all that stuff. But somehow we need to put our house in order, because the way things are running now, it's not helping. It's one thing to get us unbanned, but what are we doing with these sports now that we've been unbanned? What is FKF doing for the long-term success of football? Rugby, they're about to change management. I think the elections are coming. Unfortunately, the last administration had to live through almost 2 years of COVID, and I don't know whether they implemented the agenda or not. I doubt they did. But we have so many sports that are suffering. We have So many sports where there are 2 federations. We have sports without federations, like bodybuilders are like always being left out.
Yeah.
There's weightlifting. I think we have 2 boxing federations. Swimming, the federations are clashing. Badminton, they're clashing. You know, this country is a mess.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot
But
of
we
work.
we need leaders that can inspire confidence. Because right now you tell somebody, sponsor the football league, they're like, okay, who's in charge? Is it Doris Petra, who's the vice chairman? Is it who? When are the next elections? When are the... There's so much uncertainty that even if I was a corporate, I'd be like, wacha niweke pesa hapa. You know, let me have a concert and market and bring an international artist. You know,
Yeah.
it's the easiest thing and they can manage it
Yeah.
than giving their money to people they don't trust.
Right.
But I don't know what your company does. Does your company look for sponsorships for corporates?
Yes, we do. We do.
For federations and leagues and
No,
clubs.
federations and leagues, that's a bit too big.
Mm.
Like you said, we're kind of starting bite size, right? So we are representing, right now we're already representing some athletes. By the time this episode goes to air, we will have made our announcement that we're representing the Lionesses, the rugby team, the women's rugby team.
Oh, fantastic.
We're also currently representing the Trailblazers volleyball club team.
I saw Trailblazers. I
Yeah.
interviewed them on my show as well.
Yeah,
I was supposed to come for the launch on
the
jersey launch.
The jersey launch was really
I couldn't
nice.
make it.
It was really nice though.
Monday mornings are for report
I
writing.
know. Monday mornings are tricky.
But they're running the club in such a professional manner.
Exactly. And you find that corporates are more keen on representing those kind of smaller entities as opposed to a whole league. Like a league it gets complicated. It gets complicated, and for us, we don't feel like the league organizations are at a level where we can step in. It's huge.
They'll say you're trying to take our work.
Yeah, no, that will
Too
take
much
time.
fighting. Whose side are you on? The politics of it.
Yeah.
It's oh gosh. Sometimes I feel like I'm banging my head on a brick wall.
I know, but don't give up. And I think your platform is amazing. Like you said, you don't have to be the CS of sports to do something.
Yeah.
You have attentive followers and people who are actually listening to what you're talking about.
I want to ask everybody who feels they're a sports fan, ask yourself one question. What can I do for the sport? What can I do? If it is just sharing a flyer for a club, if it is going for your local game in your shags, if it is... Right now, clubs need help on match day. For now, buy them water, buy them stuff. Help them to keep going as those with a voice try to get bigger things done,
right.
But ask yourself, what can I do for sport?
Yeah.
Am I a keyboard warrior, or I can go to Nyayo or NCC grounds or Thika Stadium? It doesn't have to be the Premier League. It can be any sport. It doesn't have to be football. It can be rugby. It can be basketball. It can be hockey.
Yeah.
It can be archery. Heck,
Lots of sports out there.
Ask yourself, what can I do for the success of sport in this country?
Yeah. Well, Carol, I really appreciate you. I appreciate your time and what you're doing to change the narrative around sports in Africa. And in case it's not obvious from this podcast, sports is big business, if done the right way. And I believe people like yourself are doing it the right way and spreading the word. I also believe that there are companies, not just in Africa, but right here in Kenya, that are doing it the right way. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Silale. I repeat, I hate interviews.
Come on, you had a good time.
I get frustrated talking about Kenyan sports, by the way. It makes me angry. Sometimes I can't even, my train of thought is all over the place.
We'll add you some juice.
Thank you. Something stronger. But thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
You are very welcome.
And your producer never allowed me to say no, so yeah. Give Vivian a raise.
I will. She was on your neck, and I was hounding her. So
no, but these conversations need to be had.
Yeah. So thank you so much, guys. You know the drill by now. If you liked this episode, hit like, and if you loved it, hit subscribe so you don't miss out on the next amazing episode on the Narrative Podcast. We'll see you all next week.